about zoning and building codes and things like that. But yeah, tonight we're gonna talk about ADUs. We did a similar event in Kingston at the Maritime Museum a couple weeks ago, and now we're kind of doing the road show around the rest of the county. Okay, so first, I'm gonna talk about what are ADUs, and then hopefully some of you are interested in potentially building one on your property. So I'm gonna go into some details about, is an ADU right for you or your property? And then I'm gonna talk about two programs that we are running at the county that are trying to catalyze interest and development of new accessory homes. I'm gonna keep bending down. So first, why are we here? Why are we talking about this? Why have we created this Housing Smart Communities Initiative? Over the past couple of years, and some would argue even, 20 plus years, there's been a issue with housing and housing affordability in Ulster County and the Hudson Valley in general. But what we do know is that average rents in the county for a 1 and 2 bedroom apartment have increased about 40% over the past 10 years, while wages have remained stagnant. So larger portion of your housing costs are going to, large portion of your income is going to housing costs. Approximately 12% of owners and 29% of renters in Ulster County spend more than half of their monthly income on housing costs. And that's what we refer to as severely cost burdened. So when you're spending more and more of your money on housing costs, you have less money to spend on things like healthcare and childcare and food. We know that home sale prices are increasing, especially during this post-pandemic period. Median home sale prices have increased approximately 43% over the past 4 years, from $245,000 in 2019 to $350,000 in 2022. And it's gotten a little bit worse in 2023 as we're rounding out that year, leveling off a little bit, but increasing much faster than wages are. And so people are getting priced out of being able to afford a home purchase. So that's kind of some of the context of why we're here and why we created this program. And now I can go into what is an ADU and what are the benefits and some of the drawbacks. So as Marjorie mentioned, accessory dwelling unit, ADU, it's kind of jargony, but it essentially refers to all forms of additional units on a residential property. They're often categorized as attached, which is internal to the unit. So you could do a basement conversion, you could have an above garage apartment. Those are all considered attached ADUs. And then you can have detached external ADUs, which are, maybe a detached garage or an entirely new cottage or unit in your backyard. So those are kind of the two categories. They're also referred to a lot as accessory apartments, in-law units, granny flats, backyard cottages. In the town of Saugerties, they're actually called accessory apartments. So if you look up accessory apartments, you'll find all the regulations, and I'm going to go into them in a little bit. The interest, popularity has been growing for ADUs, partly because we are in a housing crisis, and this is one of the solutions. So I think this is just telling of why we're all here tonight. An important and interesting fact is that, we think of ADUs as somewhere between maybe like 300 square foot to 1,000 square feet, right? As kind of a small home. But in 1950, the average square footage of a single family home was 983 square feet. In 2017, it was 2,571. And that is while family size is actually decreasing too. So if you look at the bottom there, the actual square footage per person has gone way up. So we've got smaller families with bigger homes, essentially. And so when we think about this idea of ADUs and something foreign and kind of like only accessible for maybe, a single person or a couple, it's really not true. Folks have lived in smaller homes than they do now for a long time. And then we also know that, I'm gonna go into the benefits a little bit more in a second, but smaller homes equal less utility costs, less energy use, less heating costs as well. And our county and the county executive have pretty strong climate goals that they're trying to meet as well too. So this is another benefit of accessory dwelling units. So I mentioned a couple of these, but we are trying to build more units to bring down the costs. Typically, you want a vacancy rate of either rental units or for sale units around 5%. We're at somewhere around 2% in the county, so that's placing increased pressure on prices, which is driving prices up both for rental markets and for sale markets too. So by adding additional units to the market, hypothetically, we bring down the costs as well. There are also less money to build than a single family home. Obviously, like per square footage costs go down, the smaller the unit. And then we're hoping that building more ADUs, that communities in Ulster County become more familiar and more experienced with ADUs, and it becomes less of a foreign concept. There's environmental benefits. They're built typically on developed land within established neighborhoods, lower carbon footprint, as I mentioned. And then there's options for energy efficient prefabricated units too, which are a lot more environmentally friendly than building on site. Obviously, there's homeowner benefits, supplemental income, if you're gonna rent the unit, community building, you're creating a community with your neighbors, in your backyard, but also creating more neighbors for your community. Support for elders, if you have, an in-law or a family member who needs a place to live, you don't have to rent it out. It's a separate space for a family member. And then it also increases home values as well, and that's pretty well proven. And then there's community benefits. Increased foot traffic in your neighborhoods for businesses, somewhere like the Village, Saugerties, chances for intergenerational housing, as I mentioned, and then helps prevent displacement of residents. Some of the things we experience is elder residents who are on a fixed income can't necessarily pay their property taxes or get behind on their property taxes. And ADUs are a really great way to create a little supplemental income, pay property taxes, and then also have some help around the house. So those are some of the benefits. It's important to recognize that there are also drawbacks. There are the skeptics out there. So housing supply drawbacks focused on smaller units and smaller family sizes. So if you have a 5-person household, an ADU is probably not right for you. It's focused just on the rental market, so it doesn't really address home ownership, but it definitely can be a stepping stone if you get an affordable rent in an ADU. Environmental drawbacks, it does focus on new housing stock, so that's more material going into the housing stock rather than rehabbing existing housing stock. We know that there are like properties that could be rehabbed, and that obviously is less material intensive. Homeowner drawbacks, reduced space and privacy, unless you have a really big parcel or lot. This creates less privacy and less space for you to use, but obviously it's a give and a take. And then in most cases, increased property taxes over the long term. It really depends on your assessor in the town that you're in, but typically if you're renting it, that revenue that you're creating from an ADU covers the cost of that property tax increase. And then community drawbacks, some naysayers will say.
More than that.
What was that?
It better cover more than just the tax?
Yes, it covers a lot more than that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I mean, depending on how much if you wanna rent it out, but yes, it's pretty nominal in the research that I've done in terms of property tax increase. So there's some naysayers, and this is true depending on your neighborhood, potential traffic increases, if you've got more homes and more folks with cars in your neighborhood. And then it doesn't really address the unhoused community as well. So this is addressing homelessness per se, but it does help the housing crisis. So what are some of the barriers outside of the drawbacks and the benefits? I'm gonna go into the details about the town of Saugerties zoning code, specifically, but this is generally what we're trying to overcome with barriers in the county. Zoning code, depending on your municipality, it can be pretty restrictive. So either they're not allowed or there are a lot of requirements to meet the code or the zoning code or the building code to build an ADU. So what we really want municipalities to do is take a look at their code, their zoning code, and say, how can we make it as easy as possible for homeowners to build a second unit on their property? Parking requirements is another big one. A lot of them, depending on your neighborhood, it does make sense to require that there's another additional parking unit for the ADU. In some more dense neighborhoods, like in the village, it may not be necessary because a lot of your services you can access by transit or walking or biking. And then privacy issues is obviously another barrier. That doesn't have to do with the municipal zoning code, but people have gotten really used to living in kind of single family homes and isolated communities. And so getting over that barrier of having a neighbor closer by may be a barrier. So that's kind of the overview, the benefits, the drawbacks, some of the barriers that we're trying to overcome. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more about if you're thinking about building an ADU, if you're a friend, family member, what are the things you need to think about? On the table right here, I've given a couple of different things. There's, there's a little pamphlet with a layout of an ADU, so you can get a sense of what a layout might look like. And then it has, the top 5 things that you need to be thinking about if you're going to build an ADU. And some of them I've covered a little bit, but it's things like zoning, obviously like a budget, financing. And then I've also provided some information about a loan program through Freddie Mac, specifically for ADUs too, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But there's, as I'm presenting here, there's also resources that you can take away if you want to think a little bit more about it. So things to think about if you're going to build an ADU. As I mentioned, property taxes are likely to increase, depending on your assessor. There is a property tax exemption that the town of Saugerties could pass that would give a property tax exemption. If you built an ADU, and we would love the task force and town to pass that tax exemption. Revenue will cost to cover the increase if you're going to rent it, and a lot more. But also the value of your property increases as well. So if you're thinking about selling your home in 5 or 10 years, this is a value add, and it typically is, a return of 2 or 3 times what you invest in it. Think about designing for privacy and access. Design a unit for privacy for both yourself and your tenants. There's obviously a lot of ways to do that, so you're giving yourself enough space. Separate ingress and egress or exits and entrances for the unit, whether it's in the basement, whether it's in the backyard. There's ways to design it so really it's almost like 2 neighbors rather than one person just living in your bathroom. Establish norms and boundaries with your tenants. This is obviously true of all landlords, but especially if they're close by. And then if you can design for accessibility and for the elderly as well. Becoming a landlord, that might be a big barrier as well. There's obviously a lot of responsibilities there. There are a lot of resources online. There are template lease agreements that you can find and download. Hope that everyone, if they decide to build an ADU, charges affordable rent, and we can talk about what that looks like for different income levels in the county. But you can charge an affordable rent, and you can still make money, and you can still pay off the loan if you're going to take out a loan to do. So it's a win-win-win. You're not necessarily making a sacrifice, and you don't have to make a kill. Consider housing vouchers. There's a waiting list of, I think, a couple hundred folks in the county that have housing vouchers, but there's nowhere for them to rent because there are no affordable rentals in the county. And so every rental unit that comes online that can house one of those folks means that a family can stay in the county. And then, depending on where you are, this isn't the case in Town of Saugerties, some folks might build an ADU to use as short-term rental. We don't suggest that. The short-term rentals are eating into our housing supply, and so we would really encourage folks to use them as long. And then think about what type of ADU is appropriate for your property. New detached in the backyard, entirely separate, existing structure, you've got a freestanding garage that might work, and then attached, you have room in the basement, the attic, a converted attached garage. It really depends. So next, obviously, the cost. These numbers on the right here are actually coming from states in the western United States. So it's a little bit higher than we would probably see here in Ulster County, but California, Washington, Oregon are all light years ahead of New York in terms of ADU regulations and supporting ADUs too. But I just wanted to put that up there to say, here's generally the proportion that you should be thinking about for your costs. And I can, if you put your email down, I can share these slides after with the sources of all this. But yeah, they really, depending, obviously there are a lot of factors. If you have a basement that doesn't need a lot of work, you can do it for $60,000 or less. If you're looking for 1,000 square foot, detached, entirely new foundation, it could be upwards of $200,000. Obviously, the highest portion of that is going to construction and labor costs. So things you want to think about to bring down your price is design costs. There are plans online for ADU layout, full construction sets that you can download and bring to your building department. So that cuts out, $8,000 to $9,000. And I'll mention something that the county is doing to help that in a second. Depending on where you are, town permitting fees could be probably not that high, but a couple $1,000s to get it fully built. Size, obviously, the smaller the size, the lower the cost, and the less you have to take out for a loan. New or pre-existing, if you do have a pre-existing property, that's obviously going to cost a lot less. Go from cheaper materials and finishes if you can. That'll bring down the price as well. And then if you've got a niece or nephew or an uncle who's in the building trade and can provide some sweat equity, or yourself, that obviously brings down the cost a lot. Even if it's just, put up the frame and then I can do the installation of the sheetrock and then you hire someone for electric and plumbing. Anytime you can bring down the labor costs. This is just another little breakdown of what ADUs look like by square footage and by the type. So you can kind of see the attached ADUs, the basement ADUs, costs a little bit less, and then garage conversion 30% less, and then the detached. So how to finance it? I'm going to talk about a grant program that the county has not just a couple weeks ago launched, but it's still open for applications. And there are some other grants and revolving loan funds, not so much in New York State, unfortunately, but hopefully more to come. Home equity loans, if you can keep the costs down, you could borrow against your home for construction costs, and then the payback period is usually, not that long if you're renting it out. Construction loans, which are usually a little bit less money unless you have a lot of equity in your home. And then I also included the Freddie Mac program. And I included that specifically because this is a pretty unique program. Instead of borrowing against your home, they've been pretty liberal in saying that if you work with them, they'll look at what an ADU would rent for in your community, and then they'll let you borrow against your future rental incomes rather than using your own equity. So that's pretty unique. That's not typical of a lot of lenders. So those are the financing options. Yeah, I think I mean, it depends on how much it costs, obviously, but yeah, it's not a short term. Yeah.
So, can you go to the slide just before that?
Uh-huh.
What you're saying is with the Freddie Mac ADU program, if there are already, 2 units or at least 1 unit on the property that is not owned, is not occupied by the owner. In other words, say an owner, there are 2 properties, that are owned by one person, and on one parcel is a home with an apartment, and on the other parcel, there's a cottage. Could you use the Freddie Mac ADU program to build another unit on the second property? Theoretically,
That was confusing.
Question.
She's giving you the example of what I had told you.
Oh, gotcha.
I have a neighbor who owns he first bought a small piece of property that already has a cottage on it. Then he bought the property right next door, but he never combined them as to one piece of land.
yeah,
The land, with the cottage, he's still trying to work on to make it an apartment. The other piece of land has a house on it. It's a 2-story. He rents out the top. He lives in the bottom.
But he wants to
So-
renovate the other one.
He wants
Yeah.
to renovate the cottage, but it's not, he doesn't live technically on that property.
Oh, yeah, so I'm pretty sure this is for investment properties as well, even if it's not, your primary residence. Don't quote me on that though, but there are a couple of different loan options. This is just one of them, but Freddie Mac does have a lot of different options for investment properties. Obviously, investment properties are a little bit different. This program really is for if you have a home and you have a big backyard, building a second unit on it. But this is saying 1, 2, and 3 unit properties. So if you have 3 units on your property and you're renting 2, you can still qualify for this.
okay.
Could you explain a little bit more about the grants, the first one?
Yeah, I'm gonna go into that
Okay.
a little bit later on.
I just have a question,
Uh-huh.
kind of going back to the previous slide, when at the Maritime Center presentation,
Yeah,
you all mentioned the contests that architects.
yes, I'm gonna go into that.
Can you go through that?
Yeah,
Because I was just curious as to whether or not the architects who submitted plans, if they did it, for example, some did it just for barns, some did it
Uh-huh.
for garages, some did it for basements, I mean, how that ended up.
I will, I'll jump into that.
Thank you.
Sure. Some financing options. I'll run through this quickly. This is pulled directly from the town of Saugerties, zoning code. So I think we would like to work with the town to maybe adjust these a little bit to make it a little bit easier. I know there's potential of talking about the comprehensive plan update soon, but, this allows detached units, but then also attached accessory apartments, but only if your home has 1,800 square feet. So only on the bigger homes. Lot size must be at least 1 acre, less served by central sewer and water systems. And that's for septic system space on the property. Minimum floor area for an accessory apartment shall be 350 square feet. I'm not gonna go into all of this, but there's some restrictions on the size, minimum size, and then the maximum size. And then it can only be a 1-bedroom, be a studio or a 1-bedroom. That's for the town of Saugerties. This also requires a special use permit. So you work the building and zoning department, say, here are my construction plans. You'd like to pull a special use permit, you'd go in front of the planning board, and then they give you approval for that special use.
Excuse me,
Mhm.
could you just go back to
Sure.
the last screen? So this is in Socrates, the minimum and maximum square footage is, the maximum square footage is 600 square feet?
Yeah, and that is for I think that is for a detached. You know, I pulled these today and I had some questions about this too. So, it is a little confusing, but they can read it together. So minimum floor area for an accessory apartment shall be 300 square feet, but in no case shall it exceed 25% of the habitable area of the building in which it is located. So,
I think that's for in the building.
right,
That's
In the
the-
same.
in the structure, or 600 square. It was a little unclear. The regulations as they're written right now really are focused on, in attached ADU. And it's a little unclear what the regulations would be for a detached.
Village.
This is town.
This is just for the town.
Oh.
Yeah. And then one bedroom in the accessory apartment. Any other questions? And if you have like specific, really specific questions, like if you're actually thinking about building one, I think, going to the building and building code enforcement officer or the planning department for the town is best. Because they know the code in and out. And I probably dealt with it.
Town supersede villages?
No, separate entities. There's the village, which is its own municipality, and then there's the town.
Could be completely different.
Completely different. I've glanced at the village. If you take my card and send me an email, I can pull that up and send it to you. But I think they just made it a little easier, actually. There's a lot less, there is room for new units in the village, but there's a lot less than in the town. I'm gonna jump through this quickly because I feel like we're taking a lot of time here. No more than one accessory apartment or a total of 2 dwelling units per residential building. So there's only room for one more unit. Prior to issuance of the building permit, establishment of an accessory apartment in a principal dwelling, approval of proposed method of water supply and sewage disposal. So this is kind of getting at, I didn't really go over a bunch of detail, but your septic system, if you're not on water and sewer, needs to have capacity for an additional bedroom. Septic systems are sized essentially by the number of bedrooms in your home, but there are ways to work around that. If you have a 3-bedroom home, but you're only using one of the bedrooms, you can hypothetically convert one of those bedrooms in your home to a library or to another use, and then have an accessory dwelling unit used with that bedroom. It's a little bit antiquated. People have a lot of bedrooms in their homes that aren't filled with human beings. And so your sewer system capacity is probably bigger than it needs to and can accommodate it, but this is through the health department that you'll have to go get. And then off-street parking, at least one additional off-street parking space shall be provided for the accessory apartment. In no case shall there be parking space for less than 3 cars on the property. So this makes sense for the town, just because it is more rural. It wouldn't necessarily make sense if it were the village. I'm not sure about the road regulations, but you want a place for your tenant apartment. And that's it. Again, email me if you have like more specific questions and I can try to contact the building department or you can. So this is the +1. Any questions before I go into the programs that the county is working on?
Well, I did have a question about the, you said something about, there could be a tax exemption.
Yeah.
That was for the property, I don't remember if that was for the property, additional property tax or for considering an income on your income tax?
Property tax.
Okay.
Property tax
And that
exemption.
only applies if you are keeping it affordable, I would assume.
Nope, no. Any conversion into another unit counts. Because from the state's perspective, we need to build more units of housing at all income levels. Obviously affordable housing too, but more units that come onto the market means there's less of a pressure on the housing stock that doesn't. It only unfortunately counts towards attached, units. So if it is attached to your property,
To the house.
property tax exemption. And it's not forever.
So a basement conversion.
Yeah, basically.
Wouldn't raise your property tax.
And it's not forever. I think, if you look on the Housing Smart Communities website, there's a lot more details about it. And it's not outright. The town would have to adopt this tax exemption policy. And it's not forever, so there's not, you get the property taxes back, which is the concern for municipal electeds. That's where a lot of revenue comes from. So I think it's 8 years, but it starts at, 100% tax exemption, and then over 8 years works. So it's to incentivize someone to build it and then get a tax break for that first couple of years while they're paying.
But that is only hypothetical at this point?
It exists in different places. The city of Kingston just passed that, tax exemption, and the town could pretty easily, there's, the draft resolution is already there. Go for it.
Another point is to make the ADUs affordable, you are obligated to not raise especially if you're getting a grant or a special loan, you are obligated to keep them affordable, which means that you have a minimum increase in rent for a certain period of time. And I think the time is 10 years.
10 years. Yeah, I'm gonna jump
Yeah.
into that, right now. Yeah. Okay, and then,
Okay.
sure.
I just want to let everybody know that our Housing Smart Task Force is working with the town and the village on zoning laws and other restrictions. We're trying to get it easier for everybody to be able to build housing, to have, closer neighbors, to basically afford to still live in Saugerties and not be forced out of the town because we can't afford to live here anymore. So we're the task force, our Saugerties task force at least, is working and going to the meetings and trying to get stuff changed. So
Yeah, and
not everything that is listed right now, that might be not the same case in a year. We might have things changed, so.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and a big, kudos to the Saugerties Housing Task Force. Really good timing. This is the overall program that we launched in September of this year. Ulster County Housing Smart Communities Initiative, based off the Climate Smart Communities Initiative, which is that banner right over there. It's essentially like a certification and capacity building program to work on smart housing policy. So these are all the communities that have joined so far. We have 11 communities, Saugerties being one of them. And then we've got a list of 12 actions that the municipalities can take to make better housing policy choices. And that's what we're talking about. We're working with the town. Some of those issues. So that's kind of the context for this whole thing. That's why we're here. That's, the Saugerties task force brought everyone here tonight. So I really appreciate that. I'm gonna run through this quickly. So to kind of launch this grant program and get people excited about it, we created an ADU design competition to promote the benefits of ADUs like we're doing tonight, countywide. And then inspire the public with tangible examples of freestanding ADUs. So we're going to get some ADUs built so that people can see that they're a real thing and they actually work. There's a professional prize of $25,000 for teams with a New York State architect. And then there's a student non-professional prize, $3,000. We asked for this goes to your question, for this design competition, we were asking specifically for detached because the cost varies so much home to home for like a basement. We're asking for designs of a detached ADU in your backyard, separate foundation, 1,000 square foot max, 250 square foot minimum, 2.5 story maximum. all electric appliances, which are actually cheaper now, but that helps us meet our climate goals and reduce energy costs for the tenants. It includes a kitchen, bathroom, sleeping area, separate, exit and entrance. And then we're strongly encouraging proposals to keep the total cost of construction under $125,000. And that'll make sense in a second.
Kai,
Uh-huh.
where would I find the
The
applicant, the competition?
if you type in yes to ADUs,
Yes, the ADU.
or yes, Kingston, yes to ADUs, accessory dwelling, design competition, it'll come up. It's on the Engage Kingston website. City of Kingston is our partner with this competition. But the proposal window just closed. So, but thankfully, submissions closed August 15th. And then sometime in September or maybe October, we are going to kind of reveal who the winner is. We got 25 submissions of proposals for ADUs and then 3 non-professional. So we've got like a really good roster to choose from. And then the prize winner gets $25,000, and in exchange, they're going to create a full set of construction plans for an ADU with a winning design that are going to be free to any Ulster County resident to pull down and build in their backyard.
These are all freestanding?
These are all freestanding because we needed, everyone's home is different. And so it wouldn't make sense to ask them to try to design something based on like a typical home. Obviously, those ones are gonna cost more, but yeah, we have a lot of really good submissions. And then we're gonna showcase the winner and then also a lot of the other submissions and the architecture teams that propose them at an event sometime in September or October. So that really the incentive there is to get an ADU design, get people interested, but also we just created, a reduction in cost of $8,000 to $10,000 for anyone who wants to ADU. So that was kind of the launch of this Plus One Home program. And this is the program that Ulster County, City of Kingston, and RUPCO, that's an affordable housing developer, applied for from the state, and we received $1.75 million from the state competitive grant to launch this program. And essentially what it is for income qualified homeowners, and I'll put that up in a second. You can apply through a website that RUPCO has created for us. So if you type in RUPCO Plus One Home Program, the website will pop up and it'll have all the information about applying. We're hoping to build 12 to 14 units. And then there's a bigger pool of money that the state has. So if we do good this round, then hopefully they're going to give us more money to build more units. There's going to be a geographic distribution for the folks who then apply. So we're going to try to grant homeowners ADUs or money for ADUs in these general locations. In the application process, there is a space where you can provide a narrative of what you want to do with your accessory dwelling unit. The more affordable you're willing to rent your unit out, the more points you'll get in the application process. You get some points if you have access to water and sewer because that brings down the costs. You get some points if you are on a public transit line. And then as mentioned, there's a project narrative. So we're really trying to get this money to folks that otherwise wouldn't be able to finance an ADU and put them in the right location. Yep.
I was under the impression that this grant was just for Kingston.
That's exactly why I'm here, to dispel that ban. Anyone in Ulster County that is in a municipality that allows for ADUs. So everyone needs to apply. That's why we're doing this roadshow.
That's a little tricky in the village of Sovereign.
A little bit, it's a little tricky, but if you email me, I can look I can look up what the ADU regulations are. I know they're allowed, but depending on your property, you may not have the amount of space that you.
And
But you could potentially build an attached, ADU, and that's allowed as well. Correct. Doesn't have to be detached. You can say, I want to convert my garage, you know, it's almost ready to go.
And I encourage you all to talk to your village board members. Our liaison is Andrew Zink with the Town of Saugus Housing Smart Task Force. Kai met with them last week, and they need to know what it is you want to have built. And obviously, people in the town have access to transit and water and sewer, I mean, in the village, that people in the town do not. So I think there's room for this, and I think you can speak to your elected officials.
Couple more things about the program. So the application opened July 20th. They're closing September 8th, so you still got a couple weeks to apply. We've got, you know, staff at Repco who are helping you, assisting you through the application process. And then the kicker here is that if you receive the grant up to $125,000, you have to agree to rent the unit at an affordable rate, which is 80% of area median income, which I think I have up here, for 10 years. So in exchange for this money, which is free, you get to build an ADU, but you need to keep it rent affordable for 10 years. And then if you do get accepted and granted the grant, awarded the grant, Repco will pair you with a contract specialist to go through design, permitting process, contractor management. So they'll hire a contractor for you. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible for folks to build the units.
So would you say if one,
80% of average median income?
Yeah,
Well, that's,
No.
that's very high rent.
yeah, sorry. 80% of AMI is the income limit
of the tenant?
of the tenant. Yeah, and so it's actually 30% of monthly income is the, yeah, gets a little complicated. So you make a certain amount of money, you qualify as a tenant, but then if you get that unit, you'll never be charged more than 30% of your monthly. But yes,
Yeah.
that would be a lot.
That doesn't say, that should be changed.
That should be changed. You're right.
So would you say that if like I live, off of Fish Creek Road, there's no public transport?
Yeah.
I shouldn't bother.
No, you should still apply. You should still apply. It's, well, one, it doesn't mean you're not gonna receive the grant. It just means that
You get points.
you'll get extra points if you are near transit. And I know it's a little bit unfair because it's favoring people who are on transit lines. But if you're gonna rent to someone who may not have a car, you want them to make sure that they have access to facilities.
Right.
So you should still apply, and the second reason you should still apply is we're very likely gonna get more money. And so if you apply, you're already in the pool of applicants. Second.
Also, the more people that apply, especially in the town versus the village, even though we don't have the public transportation, the more people we have, then maybe we can get UCAT to do other lines, go up 32, go out 212. Because right now they stop at Price Chopper. That's it. They go through the town or through the village a little bit and that's it. There's nothing for the rest of us. So the more we get people involved and more people living outside that area, we can get, we can say to UCAT, hey, we have a population here with no transit. We need.
Thanks, Bridget. Yeah, that's very true. Sorry, I missed this slide. So here's what the income limits are for the homeowner, not for their tenants. So this is really focused on, median or average income homeowners who otherwise wouldn't have the finances to build an ADU to get grant funding for it. It also has to be your primary residence. We can't have someone with a second home up here applying and receiving funds. And then it also cannot be used for the short term.
Can't be a short-term rental.
What?
Short term.
Yeah, so check out the Engage Kingston website, for more information about that ADU forum, where we'll announce the winner of the design competition. And then the Repco website is repco.com/+1. But if you just Google +1 home program, Repco, find it. Okay. That was it. It was into all that, with a lot of information. And now we can have a conversation and you can ask more questions if you want, or do you have questions?
Yeah, couple of tiny homes on wheels, different things,
I think that, I mean, yes, she's asking about mobile homes, tiny homes, you know, any like non-permanent structures and what zoning might look like for that. Like, unfortunately, it is kind of restricted right now, as you probably know, for a lot of those things, not necessarily mobile homes, but for like tiny homes. I think part of the, it's really a case by case basis. Some municipalities are more liberal than others. But part of this Housing Smart Task Force is to liberalize some of those, zoning codes to make it easier to code them.
Anyone know if they're,
Hey, if you email me, I can look it up for you, but I'm pretty sure it's, you can have a mobile home, but you can't, you know, it's not, doesn't count towards your actual property taxes. Can't be there permanent. We're talking about the time. But email me or we can talk after. Because that question does come up a lot and so really there. But I think in general, it's really good. It's a really good temporary solution. And we need to be promoting it or being flexible enough to develop it.
about ownership and unless there's some permits for someone to be able to own an accessory dwelling and they have the property under it. Or to be able to split properties into smaller pieces.
Yeah,
Please.
repeat it. So she was asking about, you know, is there any models for ownership of an accessory dwelling unit? If it's part of the same parcel, so owning the piece of property or owning the home, but not the property underneath it. I haven't seen a lot of that, but I think it is possible if your lot is big enough for you to split the lot. You know, there are things like community land trusts that are a lot more, progressive in terms of like ownership of the home. A piece of property, I haven't seen anything outright where you could own a unit, but not. Yeah, I think maybe if there were like, there are like ADU tiny home communities too, and there should be more of a rule zoning for that. So that there's obviously ownership models. There's a cool project outside of Ithaca, Tompkins County, that is like tiny homes, but they're for ownership.
Just so that you know, we have done research on different housing situations. Tiny homes is actually very expensive to build. So it would be harder for a single family or person to be able to do that. Mobile homes and prefabs are actually your best bet in having something on your property. Tiny homes are good for like a community or what did you say about Ithaca?
Oh, there's like a tiny home community.
Yeah.
They're for sale properties, but they're like 500 square foot.
Yeah, but it's easier for a big company or, whatever, to do a tiny home community But for your own personal property, prefabs are usually your cheapest bet. And they're already made, so.
Yeah, especially unless you're building it yourself. But yeah, there's actually like kind of a premium on tiny homes, so they'll go for even more money than like a prefab home or a.
Actually, working on a cheaper model.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
with the plan, so we can-
Nice.
that works.
Over there, then over here.
If I want to just sum up what I think I've just seen,
Uh-huh,
is you have a presentation for an idea,
uh-huh,
and there's some funding for the idea, but there's not a lot of municipality support for the idea. And what we need to do is haggle and hassle our town into making this possible. And that's-
it's possible right now. I think the regulations are a little bit restrictive. It's obviously up to the municipality. But I think there's always room for improvement to make it as easy as possible, easier to build accessory dwelling. Does that answer your question? I can't take a stance on things like haggling, but I can promote progressive, good, smart housing.
Are you in Saturdays?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, I should do that.
Because I've got to go, but I just
Okay.
wanted, because everyone here obviously is concerned about housing, and affordable housing. And if you have been following what's been going on for the last probably 10 months to a year, there is a proposed housing development on the property that's owned by the Dominican Sisters over in Markley Heights. And last night at our town board meeting, we set the public hearings for this event. It's going to be on September 6th, Wednesday night, and on the 26th of September at 5:30 here, there will be public hearings in regard to the project. They've gone through months and months and months of time in front of the planning board. There's been some modification in the program. At this point, I think we're 131 apartments that will be built for seniors, age 60 plus, affordable housing. If you know the Fallen Waters property is reserved, this property is adjacent to that. There's quite a bit of community pushback for this project by people who live over in the Markley Heights area. And we've gotten petitions from people who support it, but when you have public hearings, it's very important for the public, people who would support this for senior housing, which this community needs desperately. It's important to come to public hearings and make your voice heard.
Would you say the days and times again?
It's the 6th of September and the 26th of September at 5:30.
Here.
I've had a lot of residents who called, who, really interested in this. They're hoping that they have homes now in town and in the village, but they're getting older. They don't want to mow the lawns anymore. They like to stay here in this area because they have children here, grandchildren here. And their thought is, if I can sell my house and move into an apartment that, is going to overlook the river, have hiking trails and just be, easy access to get into the village, walk to places. This is something that they'd like to be able to do. But what we've heard from the town board will come, it's the opposition who's coming. So, I guess what I'm saying is that this is something, if you're concerned about senior housing for this community, you really need to come and let the board and let people in the community know that this is something that should be a priority. It should be a concern.
As an add on to that, one of the things that the task force is doing is gathering an email list. You don't have to come to our meetings or anything, but we'll send out an email reminder when this or something like this is happening. So, when we want the public to show up. So, if you want to anybody want to give me emails tonight, I'll hand you that.
There's a sign up list there.
Oh, okay.
No, that's for you guys. Yeah.
I also want to make a comment about Jackie's comment, which is, that we're here, the task force is here to recommend the zoning changes in the town that will make it as easy as possible for these ADUs to be developed. So if there are restrictions, then this is where we need, again, voices of the community to say, we are in favor of, some zoning restrictions to be lifted so that ADUs can be more easily built. So any restrictions that pertain to you, Jackie, you have to bring them to us.
Right.
No, didn't the city of Kingston waive the fee for the planning board, the building?
Yeah, they-
Something like that, say,
So,
thinking of doing that?
no, yeah, that just passed, like a week or so ago. And now ADUs, as long as you have the amount of space and meet the setback requirements, which are, I put back here, we did an event in Kingston, a couple weeks ago, and we have like plots show what setbacks look like, more liberal and less liberal setbacks. So you can see that City of Kingston have their zoning code that says you can build an ADU if you have the space by right. So you don't have to go to the planning board to get approval. If you have the space and you build a post-applying ADU, it's your right to do so. And there's a couple other communities that are like that. I think that is the direction that we'd like all the communities to go. Say, if you have the space and you meet the setback requirements, you should be able to build it by right. And because going through planning approval process takes a long time, there's no guarantee that they're gonna approve it. And so that's kind of the end goal. Whoever asked that question.
You stated to someone you were going to send them some information about the village specifically?
Village code.
Yes,
If you take my card, and email me,
okay.
yeah, if there's like specific questions. And it's similar, I'm pretty sure it's similar, but a little bit different with AD regulations. A little more restrictive. Any other questions, comments?
The slide that you had that showed what the town code says about ADUs. Can a person go online and find that?
Yeah, it's not necessarily easy to find. I think the best route would be call your building code officer or the planning department or the zoning department. And they will hopefully direct you, or you can email me and I can connect you with it. But it's in the municipal code, there's a big document, intimidating document online. They don't make it easy.
No.
Anything else? Any other questions?
I know one of the things that people were, at the village board opposed somewhat, that it would mean more work for the village board. So like if you get a grant and you have to keep it affordable for 10 years, who oversees that? Who enforces that?
Rupco is
Rupco
gonna
will
see
do
that.
that. Okay. So it's not on the town.
Nope. Not on the town. Specifically for this grant program. I think there's discussion about like, the either my position or another position at the county level, helping the municipalities oversee affordability requirements, other types of programs. But I know the town of Saugerties has a housing plan or certified, Section 8 and affordable housing. So the town has capacity, no change. Any other questions? Thank you all very much. I know this is pretty dry stuff, but I'm really excited to see that people are interested in this. I like it. So, yeah, feel free to hang out. There's those little examples in the back there, and there's some information.
Take cookies.
Marjorie, if you want to say anything.
Cheese sticks.
Cookie for the road.
Thank you again. Oh, okay. Oh, planning board, okay.
Now I get to go up
Wow.
Now, him, I pick up my son in his truck, I didn't take them to work.
So,
And you hear about,
Oh, yeah.
and we,
Bus taxi, work 3 times a week, go to meetings almost every night, yeah.
right, there is very important. I think
And trying to go through things